The studio lights blazed with a kind of intensity that makes every movement, every breath, every slip of the tongue permanent. Millions of eyes were watching, not just those in the audience, but across televisions, phones, and streaming feeds. Around the world, in that charged silence, Jordan Peterson leaned forward, his voice sharp and deliberate. "She is completely unfit," he declared, his words cutting through the air like a cold blade. "Unfit for leadership, unfit for public office, unfit for serious debate." Gasps rippled through the room. It wasn't just what he said, it was the certainty, the smirk curling on his lips, the arrogant conviction that his pronouncement was the final word. He sat back as though the verdict had been delivered, as though dignity itself had no right to answer. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her eyes, steady and unshaken, locked onto Peterson with the kind of calm that unnerves, bullies and unsettles tyrants. She didn't rush to fill the silence. She didn't plead or posture. She let the insult hang there, heavy and raw, till the weight of it shifted from her shoulders to his. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of expression. Peterson's smugness, Crockett's composure, the audience torn between discomfort and anticipation. It was a duel not of fists, but of presence. And everyone knew the next move would decide the narrative. Because this wasn't just a studio debate. This was a stage where arrogance had just tried to crush dignity in front of the world. Dignity, when cornered, has a way of fighting back with a strength that echoes far beyond the walls of a television studio. Crockett's hand moved slowly, deliberately, toward her briefcase resting by her chair. The room seemed to contract, the air growing heavier, as if the audience itself had forgotten how to breathe. Peterson's smirk twitched, just slightly. Just enough to betray the first flicker of unease. What could she possibly have that would matter in this moment? What could she unveil that would pierce through his carefully crafted armor of authority? And then, with the same calm that had disarmed his insult, Jasmine Crockett pulled out a small recording device. Her finger hovered over the play button, her voice low but steady. What she pulled from her briefcase left Peterson. And the world's speech, "Well, this matters." A cultural showdown of intellect, dignity, and identity. Peterson's reputation as a psychologist and influencer sets weight of his insult. Crockett's rising role in politics and as a truth-teller. FOMOTs, but no one expected that within minutes. Crockett would turn Peterson's insult into his downfall. Jordan Peterson was never a man who shied away from the spotlight. From the lecture halls of the University of Toronto to the global stages of YouTube and podcasts, he had built an empire on his ability to command attention. He presented himself as a thinker of profound insight, a psychologist who could decode the chaos of modern life, a voice for those who felt alienated by what he called the erosion of traditional values. To his followers, he was clarity incarnate, a champion of reason in an age of noise. To his critics, he was a storm of arrogance, a man whose intellect often disguised an unyielding need to dominate discourse. Peterson's rise had been punctuated by controversy, his resistance to mandated speech laws, his critiques of identity politics, and his provocative takes on gender roles had made him both a hero and a villain. Millions admired his courage. Millions more saw the same courage as a veneer for condescension, for the kind of intellectual bullying that leaves others questioning their own legitimacy. He had built a brand that thrived on confrontation. One in which belittling an opponent was not just a tactic, it was an art form. In debates, lectures, or interviews, he wielded his intellect like a scalpel. Precise and sharp, designed to cut down anyone who dared step into his arena unprepared. This was the man who, in the glare of a live studio, had called Jasmine Crockett unfit. The insult was more than a casual remark. It was the culmination of decades spent mastering the subtle art of humiliation masked as critique. His persona demanded authority, and authority demanded the compliance of those around him. Yet beneath the polished veneer, contradictions festered. He spoke endlessly of free speech, of the sacredness of open dialogue, yet time and again, he attempted to silence perspectives that challenged his worldview. Those contradictions were his Achilles heel, hidden beneath charisma and intellect, but potent all the same. Peterson's past was filled with moments that revealed this duality. A lecture where he critiqued a student for raising questions about his arguments. A public debate where he pivoted from discussion to personal attack, leaving his opponents speechless. Social media clips where his followers cheered his verbal takedowns while critics decried the intimidation tactics disguised as argumentation. Every move, every statement, is carefully curated to reinforce his image as a towering figure of rationality, yet often betraying an insecurity that needed constant affirmation. And yet, for all his accolades, for all his followers, and the reach of his voice, there was a pattern. A rhythm that repeated across decades. Arrogance followed by miscalculation. Certainty followed by exposure. Dominance followed by unexpected downfall. He had convinced himself that intellect alone made him untouchable, that charisma and fame could shield him from scrutiny, but history had a way of humbling even the most confident. This was the man Jasmine Crockett faced. It's not just an opponent in a televised debate, but a symbol of entrenched arrogance. He was the intellectual bully, the man who believed that labels could dictate reality and insults could suppress truth. He carried the weight of his reputation like armor, confident that it would protect him from challenge or consequence. But arrogance has a rhythm, and history has a pattern. The louder the smirk, the sharper the insult. The more certain one feels of their own untouchability, the more dramatic the fall can be. Peterson's greatest skill, his ability to dominate conversation, was also a vulnerability. He underestimated the power of composure, the quiet force of lived experience, and the way dignity can turn the tables in the most public of arenas. He was about to discover, in that bright, humming studio, that words alone could not protect him. That expertise, reputation, and confidence could crumble under the weight of truth, and that even the mightiest of intellectual bullies could be undone by someone who refused to play by the rules of intimidation. But arrogance always writes its own downfall. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin in the glare of television lights or the echoing halls of Congress. It began in neighborhoods where resilience was a necessity, where hope was a quiet, stubborn flame against the weight of systemic doubt. From a young age, she learned that the world did not automatically bend to talent, intelligence, or ambition. Doors often closed before she could knock. Voices often whispered that she was not enough. But rather than shrinking, Crockett grew. Every obstacle became a lesson. Every slight, a spark that sharpened her resolve. Her family story was one of endurance and dignity, a testament to the sacrifices required to rise above circumstance. She watched her parents navigate a world that demanded they prove their worth at every turn, a world that judged identity before merit. Those experiences were formative. They instilled in her a profound empathy for those whose voices were dismissed and a fierce understanding of what it meant to fight not just for oneself, but for an entire community. Crockett's foundation was built on service, on the belief that leadership was not about dominance, but about lifting others, giving them space to be seen and heard. Education became her first battleground. She approached it not as a privilege, but as a responsibility, determined to equip herself with knowledge that could not be challenged by arrogance or prejudice. The late nights studying law, the hours preparing arguments, the endless pursuit of excellence were all investments in a future where she could step into rooms where power had historically overlooked people like her and speak with authority, clarity, and purpose. Every paper she wrote, every case she argued, every committee she joined became another step in a journey toward mastery over her own narrative. But Crockett's rise was never purely academic. She carried with her the weight of identity, the understanding that representation mattered. In every political arena she entered, she embodied a counter-narrative, that leadership could be dignified, principled, and rooted in truth, even in the face of systemic skepticism. She championed legislation that reflected justice, fairness, and accountability. She fought for communities silenced by inequality, and in doing so, she transformed her own ascent into a platform for broader societal change. Speech. Every vote became a testament to her unwavering commitment to service over self-interest. What distinguished Crockett, even more than her intellect, was her composure under pressure. She had faced harassment, subtle and overt. She had been underestimated and undervalued countless times. Yet, she did not allow these attacks to dictate her narrative. Instead, she cultivated a presence that disarmed arrogance, a poise that made others reveal their own instability. Where many would have reacted with anger or defensiveness, she responded with clarity, turning confrontation into demonstration, attack into proof. Her career was a series of crucibles that prepared her for moments like the one in the studio, every public hearing where she faced louder, more aggressive voices, every debate where she was underestimated because of her gender, race, or age, every time she was told she didn't belong. Each was a rehearsal for the stage she now occupied. She had learned to listen, to measure, to anticipate, to wait for the precise moment when composure could transform perception into revelation. And yet, Crockett's strength was never just personal. It was communal. She carried with her the hopes, frustrations, and aspirations of those who often felt unseen. Her victories became theirs, her resilience a mirror of the dignity they themselves sought to reclaim. This was not a politician who wielded power for self-glory. This was a leader who recognized that true influence was measured by the elevation of others. Her life had been defined by struggle, but also by the deliberate choice to rise above it with integrity. She understood that the world would not always be fair, that insults and doubts were inevitable, but that preparation, clarity, and unwavering commitment to truth could convert those challenges into opportunity. She had built a life where dignity was her shield and service her sword. A life that demanded nothing less than excellence in the face of intimidation. Every battle she fought prepared her for this exact moment, the moment when a world-renowned psychologist, a figure known for dominating conversation with intellect and arrogance, would attempt to dismiss her. The moment when millions would watch, anticipating either her falter or her vindication. Crockett did not arrive at this stage by accident. She had been forged in struggle, tempered by resilience, and guided by a commitment to truth that no insult could erode. And as she sat there, poised and unflinching, the studio lights casting shadows and highlighting her calm, it was clear she was ready. Not just to respond, but to redefine the rules of engagement. Not just to survive the insult, but to transform it into a statement of power, dignity, and unassailable truth. Peterson's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a predator who believes he has cornered his prey. He leaned forward, his voice dripping. With condescension, Miss Crockett, surely you don't expect anyone to take your position seriously. The complexity of public office requires more than rhetoric. It demands experience, judgment, qualities you simply lack. A ripple ran through the studio audience. Some gasped audibly, while others pressed closer to their screens at home, sensing the tension coiled tighter with each word. The camera panned over reporters scribbling notes, interns holding their breath, and live chat feeds exploding with emojis and speculations. Every eye was fixed on the stage, every mind grappling with the collision of audacity and composure. Crockett's response was silence at first, a pause that spoke volumes. She let his insult hang in the air like smoke from a slowly burning fire. Unacknowledged, but fully felt. Then, with the quiet precision of someone who had trained her entire life for moments like this, she spoke. Dr. Peterson, I hear your assessment. But public service is measured not by arrogance or intimidation, but by the impact we create and the truths we uphold. A subtle murmur of approval ran through the audience. Even some of Peterson's followers shifted uneasily in their seats, sensing that the usual playbook, belittle, dominate, conclude, was failing. He scowled slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing his carefully maintained composure. The smugness that had characterized his opening was beginning to waver, replaced by a subtle tightening of jaw and an almost imperceptible clench of his fists. You speak of impact, Peterson countered, voice sharper now, rising above the hum of murmurs. Yet you offer no framework, no rigorous analysis. Words alone cannot substitute for depth, for intellectual discipline. Surely you must recognize that leading isn't about inspiring applause. It's about navigating complexity. Beyond the comprehension of most, Crockett nodded, acknowledging the challenge without yielding an inch. And yet, history is filled with leaders who changed the course of their communities not by intimidating others into silence, but by listening, learning, and acting with integrity. I am not here to impress you, Dr. Peterson. I am here to demonstrate that truth and dignity can, and always will, carry weight, even against voices like yours. The tension was almost unbearable. Peterson leaned closer, eyes narrowing, the studio lights glinting off the corners of his glasses. He gestured, emphasizing each word with a precision that had often shattered opponents before. Ms. Crockett, you may have risen this far, but do you truly understand the machinery of influence? The pressures of leadership? You may have resilience, but resilience without discernment is dangerous. Crockett's lips curved into the faintest smile, her calm unbroken. She let the accusation settle over the room like a storm cloud, heavy, expectant. Every viewer could sense the shift, the aggressive certainty of Peterson versus the composed, unwavering poise of Crockett. She did not attack. She did not react with anger. She let her presence become the counterpoint to his escalating tirade. Audience. Reactions intensified. Some whispered to neighbors, others leaned closer to screens, the tension palpable. Live chat feeds erupted with speculation and praise. Social media notifications pinged relentlessly as hashtags began to trend even before the debate had concluded. The world was watching, and it could feel the moment stretching taut between arrogance and integrity, between condescension and restraint. Peterson's voice rose again, a final attempt to reclaim dominance. You may have prepared for this moment, but intellect, Ms. Crockett, is not measured by the applause of crowds. It is measured by mastery, by control. And then she reached into her briefcase. The room fell into a hush so absolute that it seemed the air itself had been suspended. Oh. Crockett's hand moved slowly, deliberately, toward her briefcase. The audience leaned forward in unison, their collective anticipation pressing down like a tangible weight. Peterson's smug confidence flickered for the first time, a brief shadow crossing the polished mask of certainty he had worn since the moment he entered the studio. The lights reflected sharply off his glasses, capturing the first glint of unease. As Crockett's fingers brushed the surface of the small, recording device she had placed there moments before, the camera zoomed in, following the motion with almost surgical precision. Every heartbeat, every breath seemed amplified. Crockett's eyes never left Peterson, steady, unflinching, almost serene. The contrast between them could not have been starker, one man poised to dominate, now teetering on the precipice of uncertainty, one woman embodying composure and purpose, ready to turn the tide with nothing more than a small device and her unwavering presence. Finally, her finger hovered over the play button. The studio was so silent it was deafening. Every journalist, producer, and viewer holding their collective breath. Crockett pressed down. Click. A voice filled the speakers, a voice that carried the unmistakable weight of revelation. It was Peterson, in a private conversation captured months before, saying things he had publicly denied, mocking ideas he now claimed to champion, contradicting the very principles he had used to discredit Crockett moments earlier. Recording was precise, undeniable. It revealed the gap between the polished public persona and the private disdain, the hypocrisy that had gone unnoticed, the arrogance that had been masked by eloquence and fame. The audience reacted instantly. Gasps punctuated the silence, the kind of sound that travels through a room like electricity, setting nerves alight. Some pressed hands to their mouths, others exchanged stunned glances. In homes across the country, viewers froze, eyes wide, fingers hovering over pause buttons, unable to turn away. Social media feeds exploded in real time, hashtags trending, clips circulating, comments flooding in with incredulity and praise. Unbelievable, typed one viewer. She just dismantled him. This is historic, wrote another. Da-da-da. Courage, the composure, it's unmatched. Peterson's reaction was immediate but faltering. His face tightened, jaw clenching as the first words reached his ears. His eyes darted, trying to regain control. But each phrase from the recording hit like a scalpel, exposing the contradictions and contradictions layered within his statements. Words that had once seemed untouchable crumbled under the unassailable. Evidence Crockett now held before the world. His voice, once steady and commanding, faltered in the quiet tension that had overtaken the studio. Crockett remained calm, almost impossibly so. Her expression betrayed nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Only the quiet power of someone who knows the truth and wields it responsibly. The contrast was almost cinematic. Peterson unraveling, caught in the spotlight he had long believed was his alone. Crockett poised, dignified, unassailable, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument could. The recording continued. Each phrase a strategic blow, revealing patterns of belittlement, contradictions in philosophy, moments of private dismissal that contradicted public claims. It was meticulous, undeniable. Every pause, every acknowledgement from Peterson, every minor tremor in his composure was magnified in the minds of viewers. He had believed intellect alone could protect him. He had relied on reputation, on a cultivated aura of authority. Credibility is fragile when confronted with proof. The fragility was visible in real time. Crockett's mastery of timing became apparent as the recording played. She allowed each segment to breathe, giving the audience space to absorb, react, and reflect. The silence between clips was deliberate, punctuating the impact, magnifying the humiliation. Peterson's attempts to interject were stifled by the inexorable logic of the evidence. The room seemed to lean toward Crockett with every passing second. Waiting, watching, witnessing, online. The response was instantaneous. Clips of the moment began circulating, gaining traction within minutes. Influencers, journalists, and citizens alike replayed the decisive seconds, dissecting Peterson's reactions and praising Crockett's poise. "A masterclass in composure under fire," tweeted one commentator. "She turned an insult into an unassailable triumph," wrote another. The narrative was clear. Dignity had confronted arrogance, and the world had taken notice. Peterson's veneer of control began to crack visibly. A bead of sweat traced his temple. His eyes flicked toward Crockett, a mixture of disbelief and a desperate attempt to reclaim authority. He opened his mouth, only for the recording to fill the air again, each word a blow to his credibility. His carefully constructed argument, honed over decades, now seemed hollow. A castle of cards toppling under the weight of truth. Crockett's restraint amplified the drama. She did not gloat.
Now she did not speak over him. She allowed the evidence
itself to dismantle the facade, letting every viewer witness the unraveling of a figure who had long thrived on dominance and dismissal. Each gasp, each murmur, each reaction, both in the studio and online, was a testament to her precision, to the strategic brilliance of timing and calm under pressure. And as the final segment of the recording played, the weight of the moment settled. Over everyone present, Peterson, the man who had called her unfit, who had believed intellect and reputation could insulate him from consequence, sat silent, crumbling under the undeniable proof of his own contradictions. Crockett remained composed, the very embodiment of dignity and resilience. Her victory measured not in volume or aggression, but in the quiet, its undeniable authority of truth. By the time the recording ended, Peterson's empire of words had collapsed. The moment the recording ended, the world exhaled collectively. Social media erupted like a storm breaking over a cityscape. Hashtags trending within minutes. Hashtag Crockett wins. Hashtag dignity over arrogance. Hashtag mic drop moment. Clips of the recording, tightly edited and replayed, were shared across platforms, amassing millions of views before the hour had ended. Memes flooded timelines, juxtaposing Crockett's calm poise against Peterson's flustered expressions, each one underscoring a narrative that could no longer be ignored. Arrogance had been exposed. Dignity had triumphed. Political commentators scrambled to contextualize what had just happened. Pundits on cable news dissected the confrontation with a mix of astonishment and admiration. "We've witnessed something extraordinary," one anchor admitted, voice tinged with disbelief. A politician faced down a global intellectual figure, and did so with a composure and strategy that many of us can only aspire to. Online, forums buzzed with debate. Threads grew rapidly as citizens shared opinions, dissected tactics, and celebrated Crockett's approach. Analysts noted how her calm, measured response contrasted sharply with Peterson's unraveling, framing the encounter as a case study in the power of restraint, preparation, and moral clarity. Celebrities and public figures joined the chorus. Influencers with millions of followers highlighted Crockett's courage,
Outrage.
praising the strategic brilliance of her mic-drop response. One tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just redefined what it means to be unshakable in the face of arrogance. #respect." Another posted a video montage comparing the calm dignity of Crockett to the visibly rattled Peterson, adding the caption, "This is how leaders act when confronted with truth." Endorsements, reactions, and accolades poured in from corners of public life that had little to do with politics. Artists, activists, and social justice advocates amplified the moment, making it a cultural as well as political phenomenon. Meanwhile, Peterson, who had walked into the studio with the confidence of unquestioned authority, now seemed diminished. His smirk, his carefully curated gestures, the aura of intellectual invincibility, all of it had faltered under the scrutiny of a single, well-timed recording. Analysts and commentators described him as visibly shaken, his credibility challenged in ways that reverberated far beyond the studio. For a man whose influence was built on perception as much as substance, the public unraveling was a stark reminder that arrogance is fragile when confronted with undeniable truth. Crockett, by contrast, emerged elevated. She had not only defended herself, but she had redefined the narrative. Where Peterson had attempted to belittle, she had demonstrated the quiet power of preparation, moral clarity, and resilience. Her victory was not measured in raised voices or theatrical gestures, but in the undeniable proof that poise and truth could dominate even the loudest, most intimidating adversaries. Across media platforms, headlines captured the essence: Crockett's calm crushes Peterson's arrogance, dignity wins in historic confrontation. Mic drop moment redefines leadership. The ripple effect was immediate and wide-reaching. Political analysts speculated on how this moment would influence future debates, public perception, and even electoral outcomes. Advocates for representation and equity heralded Crockett's example, framing her as a symbol of the power of integrity in spaces long dominated by those who wield intimidation as a tool. Conversations shifted, online and offline, from mere spectacle to the larger lessons embodied in the confrontation: respect, preparation, and courage could topple arrogance and transform public discourse. Yet even as the world celebrated Crockett's decisive response, the narrative hinted at something deeper. This was not simply about winning a debate or exposing hypocrisy. It was about shaping a new standard for engagement, for leadership, and for the moral courage required to confront arrogance without stooping to its level. It's the applause, the shares, the trending hashtags, all of it underscored a collective recognition. Something meaningful had happened. Something that extended beyond personalities or fleeting viral fame. But Crockett didn't just stop at winning. She turned the insult into a universal lesson. Every tweet, every commentary, every share was a reminder that dignity carries power, that preparation and principle can disarm the most formidable opposition, and that one person's calm, unwavering presence can ripple outward to inspire millions. The confrontation had ended, but its impact was just beginning, seeding conversations, shaping perceptions, and leaving a lasting imprint on a public hungry for examples of courage. Meeting truth as the echoes of the recording faded from the studio. A new sound filled the room, not applause, not chatter, but a quiet sense of understanding, a recognition that something fundamental had shifted. Jasmine Crockett leaned back slightly, her composure unwavering, and in that simple posture, the lesson became clear. Dignity, once asserted with calm and certainty, cannot be shaken by arrogance. It outlasts it, it transcends it, and it leaves a mark far deeper than any insult ever could. in the aftermath. Crockett reframed the confrontation not as a personal victory, but as a demonstration of universal truth. Leadership, she embodied, was not measured by volume or aggression. Intelligence was not the loudest voice in the room. It was the clarity, the foresight, and the moral courage to act with integrity, even when the stakes are highest. Millions of viewers understood this instantly. What they had witnessed was a masterclass in restraint, preparation, and the quiet power of truth. The confrontation also revealed a broader lesson about justice and representation. Crockett's success was a signal to communities often overlooked, silenced, or dismissed that their voices mattered. She showed that identity, experience, and perseverance were not liabilities, but sources of strength. When Peterson attempted to define who was fit and who was not, Crockett demonstrated that merit cannot be reduced to stereotypes or assumptions. Representation, she proved, was not a token. It was a force capable of shifting the balance in spaces historically dominated by privilege and power. Americanness itself was woven into this moment. The country has long celebrated the ideal of the underdog rising, the principle that anyone, regardless of background, can confront inequity and injustice with courage. Crockett's response was emblematic of that ideal, a citizen refusing to bow to arrogance, refusing to let intimidation define the narrative, and using the tools at her disposal, intellect, preparation, and unwavering composure, to assert truth and justice. It was a moment that resonated far beyond partisan lines, a reminder that the foundations of democracy rely on voices willing to stand firm. Even when confronted with the seemingly untouchable, her victory, however, was not framed in triumphalism or personal glory. Crockett elevated the lesson beyond herself, reminding audiences that these principles were accessible to everyone. Integrity, diligence, and moral clarity were not privileges of the elite. They were practices that anyone could embody. The confrontation had been a spark, but the fire it ignited was collective. A call to uphold dignity, to speak truth to power, and to recognize that arrogance, no matter how loudly proclaimed, is fragile in the face of principled action. The crescendo of the moment was unmistakable. Peterson's downfall, the social media storm, the viral headlines, all underscored a simple truth. Public displays of superiority are ephemeral, while quiet, disciplined integrity endures. Crockett's example demonstrated that courage is amplified when rooted in preparation, clarity, and unwavering commitment to principle. It was a lesson not just for politicians, but for anyone navigating spaces where power and intimidation collide. This wasn't just a debate. It was a reminder that arrogance collapses when truth takes the mic. And in that collapse, audiences around the world glimpsed something profound: the enduring power of dignity, the impact of moral courage, and the way one calm, prepared voice can inspire millions to reimagine what leadership, humanity can look like. Jordan Peterson had called Jasmine Crockett unfit. In that single word, he tried to define her worth, to confine her power, to dictate the narrative. But the world had witnessed the truth. Crockett was more than fit. She was formidable. With calm, clarity, and courage, she transformed an insult into a masterclass of dignity and strategy. She didn't just respond. She redefined the rules of engagement, showing that integrity and preparation could dismantle arrogance faster than any raised voice or condescending critique. The impact was immediate and undeniable. Millions had watched, millions had shared, and millions more were talking. Crockett's actions became a rallying point, a beacon for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told they didn't belong. Her victory wasn't just personal, it was universal, a reminder that truth, composure, and principle can overcome even the most imposing of adversaries. If you believe dignity is stronger than arrogance, share this story. Let it remind the world that courage and preparation matter, that calm resolve can shift narratives, and that one voice, rooted in truth, can inspire millions. Every like, every share, every comment becomes part of a movement that celebrates resilience, amplifies representation, and refuses to let intimidation define our future. Subscribe. Join the conversation and stand with those who choose. Principle over performative power. Be part of a community that uplifts truth, courage, and dignity. Because this isn't just a story, it's a lesson for every one of us. A testament to the power of standing firm when it matters most. Because history is watching, and so are we.